I'm always ready. I'm gonna cut that out.
You better not cut that out.
Folks, welcome to an episode of The Artenders with Mac and Dan. I am Dan. He is Mac.
Howdy.
Yes, folks, we are doing an episode on the Batman.
Batman.
Not to be confused with a Batman. Gosh, I hate a Batman. No. This is the Batman right here, right now.
What do you think about the Dark Knight rebranding?
The Dark Knight rebranding, I think, was best for the Batman brand when it comes to in terms of, like, because it allowed us as an audience to take superhero movies more seriously when it comes to approaching narrative and tone.
Yes, I completely agree. Yes, I think that it was the very first. It definitely revolutionized Batman, but also like how we see superhero movies and how like legitimate
and how we consume them as films, right? Like that.
That was the very first time that superhero movies were not campy. They were like to be taken seriously.
To be taken seriously is the big thing, you know.
Do you think Marvel could have happened without the Dark Knight?
Marvel could have happened to the Dark Knight?
Do you think that Marvel could have happened without the Dark Knight, or do you think that they would have been able to make the same splash?
Well, I think it's so different. I think probably Marvel would have taken a longer time to really get its strides going, but I think what really aided Marvel was the fact that, like, it had Iron Man first, and Iron Man was good, and then the next movie after that, I can't even it was the Hulk, the Incredible Hulk, which was okay, which was like a bunch of okay movies, but then they all led to the Avengers, right? Which felt like a sort of cataclysmic event.
Well, yeah, and in DC they all lead to the Justice League.
Oh gosh.
Okay, sorry.
As a quick aside, have you seen the Justice League?
Yeah, it's awful.
Which one? The Zack Snyder cut or the original cut?
I actually want so bad to see the Zack Snyder cut. I've never seen the Zack Snyder cut. I've been told it's okay.
I've only seen the Zack Snyder cut. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen.
Okay, well, it gets worse.
It gets
way.
Cool.
I promise it gets worse.
And that's my personal opinion. Okay, but all that to say,
we have something much different to review today.
Yes.
And that is
The Batman.
The Batman.
What makes you say it's much different? By the way, this is directed by Matt Reeves. It came out in 2022. That's just some context. Starring Robert Pattinson and Zoe Kravitz.
As we record dating this episode, it is in theaters right now. We had to see this thing in theaters.
But this is not the first thing that we had to see in theaters. This is the third thing already this season that you have instilled within us to go and watch in theaters. First it was Lamb.
I forgot about Lamb.
First it was Lamb, and then it was Uncharted. And then now it is.
Well, I'm trying to stay up with the kids. I'm trying to stay current, Danny.
Yeah, because all the kids go to movie theaters.
You're right. You're right. Kids aren't seeing Uncharted. Kids are not seeing Lamb. But I will retort, kids are seeing the Batman.
That's true.
I know a lot of kids that have seen the Batman.
Is this the talk of the town?
It is the talk of the town. This is in the center of the zeitgeist right now. I would say it goes Will Smith, Chris Rock. Number one. Number two, the Batman. I had to. I'm so excited about it. And then number two is the Batman. It is tragic. It is so sad. At the same time, so entertaining.
Zeitgeist and current discussions in the classrooms that you teach.
You're correct. I'm hearing buzzes of the Batman.
Okay.
All over the place.
And before we really get our thoughts into it, we need to pull out the penalty board because we need to catch up on some penalties that have incurred. So before I update it formally, I currently have 4 and Mac currently has 2, but we're about to update it right now. In our Cowboy Bebop 2021 television live-action series, I accidentally called the character Mao Mai, so that is a penalty point for me. Then Mac confused Rush Hour with Rush Hour 3, or rather the other way around, in our Cowboy Bebop the movie episode. And so that incurs a penalty point. And so now I'm still up by 5 and Mac is up by 3 as Mac displays and he slams down the board onto the coffee table in front of us. Yes, I have 5, he has 3. So Mac, you're the one that suggested this film. You said prior to our recording that you have seen it 2 times, and I think that's always something worth discussing whenever we consume art of any kind. And what are first impressions, and then what was interesting to you the second time? I will say to lead off with that I had only seen it once. I saw it around a week prior to our current recording at this present moment of you and I longingly looking into one another's eyes. I saw it about last week. So some things have sort of, mellowed here, and some things have sort of ruminated, marinated within my mind, within my heart, within my stomach. And so since you saw it 2 times, though, I'm interested on your POV when it comes to the consumption of both ventures.
Sure. I gotta say, the first time I went and saw it with Du Bois, I went and saw it with a friend and my brother, and so it was definitely an experience that was a little like not as serious. I wasn't like watching it as a piece of art. I was definitely watching it as like a kind of goofy little like outing.
Sure.
And it was good. It was definitely good the first time. I would say that the very first time I was actually dragged there because I was told it was amazing. And it didn't get amazing for me until Paul Dano entered. Whenever Paul Dano entered, I immediately was like,
which is what, 10 minutes into the film? What do you mean?
No, that's like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours into the film.
So are you referring to the Riddler when he has his mask off?
Off, yes. Whenever
that's an important distinction.
Sorry, yes, you're correct. Whenever the character of the Riddler is revealed,
who is the antagonist of this film?
You're correct. The villain of this film. That was whenever it turned to really, really good. And I kind of understood the hype, and it made a lot of sense to me there. The second time around, I was able to. There were some things that I was able to appreciate a little bit more. I was able to appreciate, for instance, the first time I was very pleasantly surprised that I never thought about the fact that it was Robert Pattinson. I was really expecting Robert Pattinson's Batman. That's really not what this is at all.
Yeah,
not even a shred. Because Robert Pattinson is Bruce Wayne unmasked and not Batman for maybe 10 or 20, maybe 20% of this film, and a hefty majority of the film is him in costume.
Yeah, and this is a consistent theme, I think, with Batman as a character and in films in general, of how it seems like the Caped Crusader wants to be the Batman more than he wants to be Bruce Wayne. And so that is, in terms of just strictly screen time, that is lengthily apparent, and also in the narrative storytelling. And
but also, I think that every Batman that we've seen so far has been insert actor's Batman. Ben Affleck's Batman.
Christian Bale's, Michael Keaton.
I think this is the very first Batman that it is not Robert Pattinson's Batman. In my mind, this is Matt Reeves' Batman. From
a directorial point of view.
Yeah, I think that he had more control over how I perceived Batman than Robert Pattinson did, is what I'm trying to say.
Interesting.
Whereas I don't think that's necessarily been the case before. Now, that was the first time, right? The second time, I was able to appreciate some things that Robert Pattinson did a little more.
Okay.
But it was definitely still Matt Reeves' Batman to me, which was not necessarily a bad thing. I actually there were some things that I really liked about that.
I think one of the strong suits for this movie, and once again, not a diss to Robert Pattinson in a sort of weird way, but one of the strengths of this movie was the directorial mantle that Matt Reeves took on, I think, and approaching Gotham, which is the setting, the city that Batman takes place in, approaching that city, approaching that story, approaching the visuals, as well as having the sort of 70s, 80s noir sort of approach. True. This detective sort of thing that really goes well with Batman as a character and how he, solves crimes, right? He is commonly regarded as, his nickname is the world's greatest detective, right? And I'm pretty sure the very first Batman comics was called, if I'm not mistaken, I would need to look this up. I'm giving myself, the avenue for which I can be wrong, okay? I believe they're called the Detective Comics, right? Or at the very least, detective is in the name, right? So being a detective is a gigantic part of Batman, but when you think of the Batman films, just in the past, in general, we don't think of Batman as a detective.
Right.
Right? It's such a loose part to that character. When you play a Batman game, that's going to be a little bit different. There's a lot of investigation when it comes to Batman video games, sure, because it's a video game, but when it
Have
comes
you played the video
to
games?
The Lego Batman games.
God damn it, Danny. Is that what you were imagining just now in your mind as you were talking about it?
I was thinking of the Arkham
of course.
games.
Of
yeah.
course.
I mean, but like investigation is still like a major part of those games.
You're right. It's true.
But it's hard to make investigation and detective work interesting to watch that isn't just procedural television, but even then procedural television like doesn't stay too long within,
right.
They don't try that hard to make investigation interesting.
Right. Yeah, I mean most Batman movies, the challenge is how do we make this really complicated, NCIS episode,
right?
Something that's worth 2 hours. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
It really is just like a riddle, and they give you some clues, and you have to figure it out. You're absolutely right.
But what I felt about this movie was that like there was a certain joy of like when Batman figured things out, right? There was a constant, and I think the Riddler was a great usage, in terms of trickling of information for the protagonist and for the audience, right? That there was always something to solve, which, I don't know, at least for me as an audience member, was really, really enjoyable. There was always something around the corner to figure out because there was this grand mystery that was continually being unraveled. Like, why are all these things related, et cetera, et cetera? Like, what is going on here? There was something enjoyable about that as opposed to purely just trying to find and stop the bad guy, right? That in order to find and stop the bad guy, it involved unmasking this gigantic conspiracy, right, which was, at least in terms of the progression of the film, a treat, right? And so even though the movie is bordering 3 hours of a runtime, it didn't feel that long.
Not the first time. The first time it did not feel like that. It did not feel like that the first time. The second time, they can cut some shit for sure. They can cut some stuff.
Okay, so let's get into that.
Yeah.
then.
So the second time, I definitely I hit a wall. I hit a wall around, and it was actually before Paul Dano even came in. I think it was, it was revealed.
Listen, that's like the start of the third act of the film.
Right. Which is good that's whenever like they really take a step up and they change some things because it's just such a it feels like you're watching a new episode of this series or something. You know what I mean? Which I think is kind of smart. I have no idea. We can reckless speculation this. I feel like there must be some sort of change happening in film that has to do with how we watch content most consistently, like binging a show, maybe a movie is starting to feel like a 3-episode miniseries, if that makes any sense. Like it's supposed to feel like it's refreshing you every single act. Because I gotta say, this was way longer than a movie like Power of the Dog, which like 10 or 20 years ago. I know.
What is that movie? Hold on,
it's
I'm on
on Netflix. It was a bunch of like Oscar nominations. It has Benedict Cumberbatch, and it was okay. And like 10 or 20 years ago, it would have been like a masterpiece, right? But nowadays, it was just so long and so quiet and so drawn out, and it was just difficult to watch at times. It was very boring for me. But this movie, for some reason, even though it's 3 hours long, just kept refreshing you because there were so many new moments, but mainly new bad guys, not literal like villains, but new antagonists, like for each.
See.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so,
or rather, like not so much antagonists in the traditional sense, but characters who are in opposition to the protagonist.
Right. So, like for instance, the
semantics.
So, but it's a good distinction to draw. So, like,
so you have Falcone.
You have Falcone.
You have Oz / the Penguin.
Absolutely. And then you also, I mean, and he's also fighting the police and everything, and like he's kind of like in contention with Catwoman from time to time and everything.
Exactly.
But the fact that it's that they almost segment each bad guy that he runs into their own little mini story that like propels him towards the Riddler is really, it's consistently refreshing and easy to follow.
And it feels kind of like a novel, doesn't it?
Yes, it's like chapters.
It feels like all of these different stories that just all of a sudden they funnel into one, and it's articulately. I don't think I used that word right. Whatever. But it's really, really well done. It is, right? In that sense, in that particular sense, I'm not trying to one-to-one comparison. But like it does remind me a little bit of The Wire. Right? Where it feels kind of like a novel, and it feels like these storylines, which seem kind of unrelated, but they're really always related the entire time. And so then, when you're approaching, I guess, like towards like the second act of the film, right? At the end of the second act, and all these stories are coming together as one. And I think what also propels this film to even greater heights is how it relates to Bruce Wayne as a person, right? Where the cause of this entire grand conspiracy was Bruce Wayne's parents, right? For those of you who don't know, which I would be shocked, Bruce Wayne is Batman.
Yes.
I don't think we said that.
Sorry if that's a spoiler for anyone. I agree. Well, and this movie also assumes that you know a lot.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I the second time I went to see it with Emma.
This movie at least assumes that, like, you know who Batman is, right? And so, like, it doesn't try to, like, teach you everything about Batman. My ear is really itchy. Do you see this right now? I just cannot.
I see the you're itching. I do not see the itch. But the second time that I went and saw it, I saw it with Emma, right? And
who's Emma?
Emma is my girlfriend.
Thank you.
And also an artist and a very clever one. And so we were watching it, and as we left the theater, I was like, I realized how many things you're supposed to know about Batman. I'm really sorry that I didn't prep you for that. Because
like what?
Also, this was her very first Batman movie that she's ever seen.
Oh.
Crazy. Exactly. But what's interesting is that all the things that you need to know about Batman, she did already know. And it was just because, like, she's been around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, I know the name Bruce Wayne. I know that's Batman. I know that his parents died. I don't know how, but I know his parents died. And, like, that's an important thing in his life. And it's, like, kind of
that's really like all you need to know.
That and
Alfred exists?
Yeah. And because they don't really tell you who Alfred is. They're just like, Alfred. And she's like, I know he's the butler. And I'm like, that's really all you need to know. That's it. Which was interesting. But what you're talking about was...
especially since he didn't do it.
But what you're talking about with Bruce Wayne and the way they use Bruce Wayne in terms of storytelling, I had a huge light bulb moment in the middle of watching it the second time that made me really happy that I'm stealing something that Matt Reeves did. And it's this. Because we are following Bruce Wayne, our protagonist, our main character, because we are following that person, we don't need much textually to tell us who that person is or how that person is growing, because we are visually seeing how that person is growing. They don't really talk about Bruce Wayne or Bruce Wayne's perspective. They just show us Bruce Wayne's perspective because we're already on that journey. Everyone else gets the text. So, and I never really thought about that, but I was like, yeah, because I was thinking about it, the whole, like, Robert Pattinson screen time thing, like, how much is Robert Pattinson actually being Robert Pattinson, or, like, like, acting, or, like, how much does he do? And I'm sitting there.
He's not acting at all.
I know, really.
He's so
just
good.
Brooding in the corner. No, he's. But I'm sitting there watching him, and I'm like, he has practically no monologues, and people talk about him very little. But every other character talks his fucking ear off, and I'm like, I wonder why that is. I wonder how that like how that came to be. And I'm like, oh, well, that makes total sense. I know everything that I need to know about Batman because I'm watching it right now.
Yeah.
You don't need to drill it.
And you get a lot of it from the opening monologue and the closing monologue,
right?
Like the voiceovers.
Exactly, right. So, like, every other, and this isn't just a superhero movie thing, but I'm just going to use superhero movies as an example. If we look at really any other superhero movie, Iron Man, any of the other Batman, Captain America, whatever, they all are very talkative protagonists, and they do have quite a lot of lines, and we learn a lot about them based off of them telling us about themselves rather than just, like, being themselves. And so the fact that this kind of jumped into it but allowed you to pick up information on Batman along the way was really clever, I thought. And so, like, we're hearing things about the Riddler, we're hearing things about the villains, or, like, we're hearing things about the case or the problem they're trying to solve, while we're seeing, him having to, like, emotionally deal with or emotionally unload all of the crap that he has to do as the Batman, which, may I say, was the very first thing that I noticed about the Batman, this one, and made me most excited for the movie. I was immediately bought in and like, okay, I think I'm here for this. The second that he comes home from beating the crap out of people, he takes his little like contact camera thing out and he puts it on the little device and he has to watch through everything that he's doing and he has to journal so that he can like unload.
So he learns,
And then over the course of the movie, like they never really say anything about it, but I definitely noticed the second time, he gradually, like slowly but surely, has Alfred do more and more of the reflective work and like more of that like
and part of it too is like he's busy doing other things as well.
But also like it is, I can't even imagine like the fucking emotional toll it must take on you to be the Batman, and like it's just. It is a very dramatic and like human look at a superhero movie, which is very rare.
Well, because that's an exact thing where you are having your protagonists confront like the actions that they just, incurred.
Yeah.
Right? Like that is like just direct confrontation.
Well, yeah.
And so then it propels the character to then confront themselves.
And it also makes it makes so much sense. I mean, Batman always prides himself on he doesn't kill people. He's one of the only heroes that does not kill people. He refuses, and he's like, I'll like make him unconscious, I'll beat him up, whatever, but I'm not going to try to kill anyone. I might, but I'm not going to try to kill anyone, right?
And if he does kill somebody, like that means he has literally no other choice, or he does it by accident.
Exactly. And so to see him, so it's like if that's that guy's POV, then he must not necessarily like hurting people either. You know what I mean? So it's interesting to see him beat bad guys up, and it does impact him.
Yes,
because it should.
And then it begs the question: like, it seems like there's some sort of emotional toll that it takes from him when he's Batman. However, he much prefers to be Batman than Bruce Wayne.
Right.
They mention multiple times in the film how they never see Bruce Wayne, and Bruce Wayne doesn't do X, Y, and Z. He doesn't donate any sort of money. He is so inactive and just lives essentially in this castle and just does nothing.
And he has that moment with Alfred, right, where Alfred's talking about like like all the things he's doing for the city and like what his father did and all the programs and everything. And at one point Bruce Wayne says, if I'm not able to help anybody, then like, what am I here for? Like that's my only purpose, is to like try and make the world a better place. And the most direct way I can do that is by being the Batman.
Right.
And that I think right there is what makes it so interesting, because how other versions of Batman have gone is that he's like, I think being the Batman is the most important thing I could be, and then he tries to be the Batman and on and on and on and everything. But in this one, it is like Bruce Wayne is actively depressed whenever he is Bruce Wayne. It's not just that he prefers being the Batman, it is that he fucking despises being Bruce Wayne, because he's like, I'm doing nothing right now. I'm wasting space. Like, I'm wasting my time on this planet.
I'm an inactive member of the community.
Exactly.
And like he sees himself, especially in the beginning of the film. Well, actually no, in both sides of the film, right? But just in different ways. That like at the beginning of the film, like he sees himself as vengeance, right? And he sees himself as this sort of like terrifying reckoning upon like the criminal underbelly of the city. But then he grows, he learns to become a hero at the end.
Yeah,
which is like an actually really neat journey when you think about it. And it's a little bit understated in the film, I think, for better and for worse. But like he really like actually becomes a hero at the end, which is a wonderful journey for that character to go on, if that makes sense.
Right. And on top of that, it's interesting how every single time that he takes off the suit and goes out into the world because he's forced to, every time that he is out in the world as Bruce Wayne, something bad happens. Something really bad happens.
And he can't stop it at that moment because he's not Batman.
Because he's not Batman, exactly. So like every time that he isn't the Batman and he like is trying to be Bruce Wayne, which he does not like being, he's given several more reasons as to why he should just never be Bruce Wayne again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's sad, but it's also like it feels like every single choice that was made in this movie by Matt Reeves, as well as Robert Pattinson, I'm going to give him a little bit of credit as well. I'm not going to try and take everything away from him here. every single choice that was made that makes this Batman drastically different from every other Batman was very, very supported. And it made a lot of sense. Every single thing that I saw, I was like, weird. Oh, well, no, I guess that makes sense. You know what I mean? I had that moment a million times in the movie.
And I think, like, also, I don't want... Because, listen, the Nolan films, the Dark Knight trilogy are fantastic, right?
Oh, my...
And
unbelievable.
I think, like, even though maybe this is the most of, like, attributing a director to a Batman film, like... The Nolan films are also that. You know, if not at that level, then just below or just above, right? Like that's still a factor, but there is something there. It feels like a lot more of a presence and a lot more of care about Batman as a character, as opposed to, in particular, the Nolan films, right? I can't speak to, I don't know, Val Kilmer's Batman, right? To pull a name out of the hat, right? But I think there was this like very intricate care about the growth of Batman's character, and to bring it back to this, I think it was a really good choice specifically to have the antagonist of the film tied into the relationship that Bruce Wayne has with his parents, at the fact that the Riddler was his kid that was part of this orphanage program, but because Bruce Wayne's parents was murdered, then the orphanage program fell through and his life became a living hell. And then, like, Bruce Wayne has to deal with the fact that, like, oh, his mother and his father have a past and he has to deal with that, right? Like, that feels like a really tangible thing that's wonderfully sort of coalesced into this film, right? When you think about like Ra's al Ghul or the Joker or Bane in the Dark Knight trilogy, they feel sort of related and unrelated in some respects to Bruce Wayne as a character, right? Ra's al Ghul, I think, being the most related because like he's the one that sort of trains Bruce Wayne, right? But there's something about having a character that's really related to Bruce Wayne's past that makes it much more personal of a journey for the Batman to go on, which obviously they're setting up for more films after this. I'm pretty sure Matt Reeves has signed on to like 2 more films after this for the Batman new trilogy, I guess. But that is a really good jumping off point to have at least the first movie become a very much more personal of a journey. Not to say that previous films weren't personal, but certainly this one was more so, is what I'm trying to articulate.
Absolutely. And that I think one of the biggest differences between the Christopher Nolan trilogy as well as or in opposition to this Matt Reeves movie is the fact that Christopher Nolan, what made some of his directorial choices so interesting and so awesome is that he gave so much permission and granted so much freedom to the actors, right? Like, whenever I'm thinking back to Dark Knight, I'm not thinking, man, Christopher Nolan did such a good job and blah, 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 blah. I'm thinking Heath Ledger's Joker is one of the most haunting and intelligent performances I've ever seen on screen, period.
And a lot of that's Heath Ledger. You know?
That's what I mean.
You know?
And like
aided by great directing, for sure.
Absolutely. But at the end of the day, it is largely finding ways to extend the length of an average shot so that we can see as much Heath Ledger's performance as possible. Yeah. Not just hiding Heath Ledger's performance in the story that I'm trying to tell as a director. Yeah. And there was a lot more Matt Reeves being a star of this movie than any actor.
Oh, but did you see Colin Farrell as Oz / the Penguin? Gold medal.
We'll get what? With like no seconds left? God damn it, Danny. All right, and we're back. So I hate doing that. I need to stop doing that.
Well, like, then don't do it.
It's just funny. I don't know. There's something. It just feels right.
But then you immediately break character.
I'm just like, ugh.
Like, you do it, and 9 times out of 10, you break character.
Yeah, because I do it, and it feels good in the moment, and then directly after, I'm like, I'm a fraud.
Yeah, the shame is immediate.
Yeah, that's just not me. That's just not me. All right, let's start. So, Danny, we've left off with your hot take. No. You're gold medal. You're gold medal. You're gold medal. That's not. That was a slip of the tongue.
First of all, you did correct yourself, and also
you.
second of all, we don't have a bit on this show called
Hot Take. It's still sort of I know, but that's not disrespecting the show because that was a slip of the tongue. Now, Danny, your gold medal was Colin Farrell's Oz.
Yeah.
Why?
Because that character and that acting performance, there was so much fun whenever he was on screen.
Yeah.
Immense amount of listening.
That's true.
Beautiful amount of like responding, taking in what's being given to him, and then just sending it right back. Very clear action, really distinct objective. I think was just an incredible performance by him. It's also even better because you watch it, he looks nothing like Colin Farrell.
You're right.
It's stupid that you say, hey, Colin Farrell is in this film, and then your first thought would be where? Because I saw this film, and Colin Farrell's not in it, except he is.
Barely even remembered the fact that was Colin Farrell.
Exactly. Because the makeup job is fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely impeccable job in terms of just the makeup job done upon him. And like typically, the Penguin is a shorter individual, but like they didn't lean into it for this film and whatever. I guess it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, I enjoyed this character, this version of the character, and I really, really enjoyed this actor's performance because I thought his performance was the most in tune with what was going on every single scene, right? I mean, the amount of listening that was happening was top tier.
So you think Colin Farrell brought it more than every other person that worked on this project?
Yes.
Wow.
In terms of being in a scene with their respective scene partners.
Sure.
Yes.
So gold medal for actors.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Listen, Mac. Now, listen, I don't need to explain this to you, pal, but the gold medal is, like, predominantly, typically, for actors, but it doesn't have to be that sometimes, like in Dynasty Warriors, it was the costume department.
That's the truth.
Sometimes it is the director, sometimes it's even maybe a scene or a moment.
Right.
But
Dynasty Warriors.
9 times out of 10, well, really 8 times out of 10, let's be honest, the gold medal is typically for an actor.
True. Okay, sure. Then in that case, out of all of your acting choices or actor choices, I could see how it would make sense to give it to Colin Farrell. I'll give you that.
Why were you shocked by this?
I think purely because it seemed like because he's good. He's very, very good. He seemed like such an insequential part of the movie. Like he seemed pretty inconsequential part. Thank you. Inconsequential part of the movie,
sure.
Like a part that was important, but that didn't seem like it was anything like he was ever in the driver's seat. You know what I mean?
The driver's room.
I was about to say
all the drivers get together. They stand in a room. Hey, this is the driver's
seat.
That's a play right there. That's a title to a play, The Driver's Room.
You're right.
Like that's not a TV show. That's not a movie. That is a play that is like B+ at most.
Who's your star vehicle in The Driver's Room?
It's your star vehicle.
Yeah. Who's your Vanity Project actor? Who's there?
I feel like it has to be like Vin Diesel.
Oh, way different than I was thinking. I was thinking like driven down into the ground.
Well, maybe Adam Driver.
Nah, soft high five. Oh my gosh, Adam Driver, you suck ass. All right, no, you suck ass. Adam Driver's a god. You suck ass. Adam Driver. Period. Danny, you suck ass.
Okay,
period.
but you were surprised that I said him because he's never in the driver's seat.
Yeah, that's my thing. It's like he doesn't have a lot to do with the success of this movie.
Sure, but listen, whenever he was on screen, it was the best performance and the best character.
Okay, I could see where you're coming from there.
And like it seems like he's setting, or rather, the character is being set up to be a much more predominant role, right? And I think this
feels
is a
like
good
the next
setup.
movie or two, he's about to be a very big deal. Absolutely. Yeah. Now that Falcon's gone, now that he's at the top of the heap or whatever, like the power grab they were talking about.
Imogen Heap, yeah.
What?
Nothing.
Okay. Now, We are. I would like to take it into the next phase of the conversation, which is, I think, what makes this movie overall so special and so spectacular is the fact that the biggest production approach that Matt Reeves took was making this version of Batman one that is entirely possible.
Yes, that's an excellent point.
Is so haunting. It is genuinely terrifying.
Huzzah! There it is.
You know what I mean?
Yes. No, like, I'm with you. 100%.
Every other superhero movie I've ever seen is like, they might say that it's possible at times, like Iron Man, for instance. Like, it's just a real guy, but no, it's not. No, it's not. He does some pretty fictional things.
Look. The closest that, humanity in terms of, or rather like as close to reality as superhero films get, and like the possibility of them has always, I think this is safe to say, has always been Batman films.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So even though
it's
some
been a
Batman
driving
villains,
force in the culture for a really long time in America,
and so even though some Batman villains that are like much more crazy, like Killer Croc or Clayface,
I totally forgot.
You know, like really, or Man-Bat, for example. Is this your first time hearing of Man-Bat?
I've never heard of Man-Bat.
Well, look him up. He's a fun one.
Jeez.
But all that to say, like, there are still, villains in the Batman canon that are just crazy, wild stuff. But yes, exactly. What made this particular film so much more haunting was just how they all felt more like people, and this all felt more like reality, and like Riddler can be somebody.
Right.
Scary is the man that can walk by you down the street and you don't know who they are, and they are the one.
Yeah, the devil walks among us.
Exactly.
Yeah, that there is it's, maybe one of the most haunting lines of the entire movie is, he seems to be some accountant. Like, the second they say that, I'm like, I'm sorry, what did you just say?
He's just a guy.
A guy. That is freaky, right?
Yeah. Which makes it more effective.
Which makes it way more effective.
Because it makes the antagonist more human. And, like, once again, you don't have to necessarily agree with the antagonist in order to have the antagonist be successful.
Right.
But if you can establish some sort of relation between the audience and the antagonist, and then occasionally to force the audience to confront with the mirror and force the audience to actually take a look within themselves, that is because of the antagonist, that is an effective use of the antagonist.
Right.
I don't think it goes to that far of an extent, but I would say it's probably the farthest in that manner, right? In that humanistic, I don't think that's a word, manner.
I'm not sure.
That it takes like really, really good steps.
For me, it always comes back to Thanos. In my mind, like the one of the best like storyboarded villains that I can think of in recent memory is Thanos, and it has nothing to do with the character's dialogue or execution or whatever. It's purely the fact that everyone in that theater, when they were watching Avengers, whenever they meet Thanos, they think he's awful and this like horrible person, this villain and everything. But as the movie goes on, everyone has this moment where it clicks, and they aren't on his side ever, but they think to themselves, it makes a lot of sense.
You can see the logic, and you can see how somebody would be in Thanos's position.
And then he totally thinks he's right. And it's not that he has some, like Joker-esque, like crazy.
I'm crazy. Yeah, I want anarchy.
Yeah, he has like some mental issue that is like driving him to this violent action or whatever. It's like it totally makes sense, and that I kind of saw quite a lot of that in the Riddler. Where at first you're like, oh, he's just some crazy guy, but the further you get into the Riddler, you're like, he's really interesting. And although I don't agree with him, I can understand how he gets there.
Sure, a little bit different. Now, Thanos has a lot of screen time. Thanos has a lot of screen time.
This is true.
The Riddler does not get a lot of screen time, right. Period. And we don't see his face until end of the second act, beginning of the third act.
Good 2 hours in the movie.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Now, I guess I could see somebody approach, the position that is Riddler, but what makes Riddler more scary to me is the fact that, like, it could just be anybody. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's less like the logical decisions behind it.
Yeah.
And more that the Riddler is just a guy.
I think it's both. Personally.
I think it's a little bit of both?
I think so.
Because I don't think the Riddler is that well developed as a character in terms of his execution in the film. You know, I don't think he's that much developed. I think he is like a character, and like his motivations are clear, and they're at least thought out, and we at least have that genuinely great scene between the Batman and Paul Dano's Riddler, unmasked, while Dano's Riddler is in Arkham, right? In the asylum.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, that's a wonderful scene, but
really good scene.
But the thing is that, like, I don't know. I think it's very different characters, the Riddler and Thanos. And I think how Thanos, like, you can see Thanos as a human, right? And that's where you sort of side with Thanos. What makes the Riddler terrifying is that you do see him as a human.
Because he is.
Yeah.
Right. Then
I need to, like, sort of iron out this take a little bit more.
Yeah, please,
but what I'm trying to say is, like, I think the comparison is a valid one, but they're two very different approaches.
Yeah.
When it comes to an antagonist.
It's not a 1-to-1 like you would say.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that there is a moment with Thanos where I go, okay, I understand where you're coming from, and although I wouldn't do the same thing, I understand why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I had the exact same moment with the Riddler, and I don't often have that moment with villains where I'm like, okay, I wouldn't do the same thing, but after I was, after I was an orphan and had to grow up watching Bruce Wayne on TV, and after I was able to very subtly and quietly witness the fact that every single person that is in control of the city is all corrupt and being and in bed with the villains at, like, all the time, that would drive me crazy as well. And and there's a couple more ands that I can pack on, like, and I feel like I'm never going to make a difference in this world, and I think I'm going to die and never be noticed, and blah 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 blah. Makes sense to me. Now, another thing that also creeps me the heck out is so Danny, this is going to be a very dark conversation. Strap in. Sorry in advance. If someone's going to organize a mass shooting, how do they do it? Where would they do it?
What? Why are you asking me?
I'm wondering if you know.
I mean, I guess some, like, public forum of some sort.
Really good guess, Danny. Most of, like, well over 50% of I don't know the exact statistic, but I know that well over 50% of the mass shootings that we know over the last decade have been either organized or at least publicized that they were about to happen on forums, on 4chan, 8chan type, like kind of pseudo dark web type
sorry.
stuff.
No, I meant public forum, like in person, public events.
No. I mean like they're posting it online and trying to get people on board, like in a dark web type setting.
This feels reckless. Is this reckless?
No. It is absolutely the truth. Please go and do your own research, and listeners, please go and do your own research.
Yes, do your own research.
Yeah, no, it's the truth. Most of the mass shootings that we have seen over the past decade, there is some sort of documentation of it, and
that, like, it's going to happen.
That it's about to happen.
Okay. Gotcha.
Now, that happens every single day. People, like, threaten that kind of stuff every single day online, and most of that never happens. So you can't, like, expect that every single time someone threatens somebody, it's going to be a problem. As I've been a teacher, there have been like bomb threats or like shooter threats at my school. Has it ever happened? Absolutely not. But that happens constantly, all the time. True. It's a true fact. But the thing is that is how you do it in real life. So it's interesting to me that they're sitting there in the writer's room and they're thinking to themselves, okay, well, the Riddler's just a regular guy, a real guy, and he's trying to organize a mass shooting at the Gotham Square Garden, which we'll get back to. How does he do it? He goes to a pseudo 4chan type chat room.
He's like live streaming,
and he has like like mostly public content, but like password protected content from here and there.
It looks like a Facebook group page.
It's very regular and real. It's so familiar. That is probably the part that creeps me out the most, because I'm like, that not only is possible, but has happened before. Like, we've seen it happen before. That creeps me out a lot. And so it's interesting that everything that Batman does, except like a little bit of technology, here and there, is pretty possible. Everything that Catwoman does, although, like a little bit of editing here and there in terms of like the movement or whatever, is pretty possible. The Riddler's extremely possible.
Sure. Now, I don't think this is, you know what? Screw it. Let's just say this is sizzle serve, even though I don't think it is.
Give it.
Let's just have it be spicy. I think the Riddler would have been more interesting and actually a better character if he through and through was just a guy and wasn't somebody that had some sort of like mental breakdown. No, like a mental breakdown of sorts, right? We're just like not obviously, but. Oh God! I'm putting my foot in my mouth as we speak. You're hearing it and seeing it happen lifetime.
No,
Mac just need the microphone.
Oh my God, that is such a point. Fuck me, man.
His face was glorious.
No.
His eyes were bulging out of his head.
The point.
It was like looking at two different fish bowls. Just boom, just right out there. And he need the microphone on accident.
Okay. No, I understand what you're saying.
So,
though.
the Riddler is going through a mental thing.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
And
that is annoying.
Right.
I agree.
So, but I think what would have made, because that's a very common trope, right? To have your villain antagonist be crazy guy that is like unhinged.
Yeah.
Right. I think it would have been so much more scarier that, like, if we had a sort of kind of, and this is a little bit of a deep cut, like the movie Law Abiding Citizen with Gerard Butler and Jamie Foxx.
In my life.
You should watch it, actually.
Good.
Where, long story short, Gerard Butler, it just seems to be like this guy, but he has this crazy, spoiler alert, crazy master plan, like intricate, bombs and killing machines here and there to enact revenge. But he's just a guy. And it's kind of much more scary. He's just a law-abiding citizen, right? Where I think it would have been freakier if they really leaned into the fact of, like, yeah, this is just Edward Nashton. And he did all this.
Yeah, right.
He is just an accountant.
Yeah,
he's not unhinged.
Not the Riddler.
This is just like and like, if it becomes more logical for that character to perform those actions, then it's actually a lot more effective, I think.
Yeah.
In terms of like the execution of that character, and so then we really have to confront with the fact of, like, I don't know, because it's a lot easier to. This is shitty. This is really, really shitty. It's a lot easier for the common folk, let's say, to disassociate with somebody that's more unhinged.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's true.
So then if you have an antagonist that isn't unhinged in any sort of way, is only unhinged in action, in terms of, all this mass killing and shit, that's right. It forces the audience a lot more to look at that mirror.
You should be able to look at the Riddler and the very first thought you have to yourself be, I know that guy.
Yeah.
That's scary.
And so, like, half of it is that. The other half is he's totally unhinged.
Although, okay, so I understand the instinct, and I understand absolutely that I agree it would have been a more interesting movie. This movie would have been a more interesting movie. But I think it kind of comes back to the same point as, like, the Cowboy Bebop point, which is they are still on, although they took a lot of freedoms, a lot of liberties with this story, they are still on a very tiny leash in terms of the fact that it's still Batman. And I think what is holding them back is the fact that even though their take on the Riddler is wildly different than any Riddler we've ever seen,
and it's very much so like the Zodiac Killer,
right? It's a very new era Riddler, and it's a cool Riddler.
Yeah,
it's still the Riddler, and and they can't really get too far away from the fact that it's the Riddler.
I mean, sure, because the core of the character is always going to be the same, regardless of whether or not Riddler is vaudevillian with a cane and with a bowler hat, or is like wacky and zany like Jim Carrey, or is maniacal in some like sick way. Like there have been multiple iterations and interpretations of the Riddler. That's pretty vast, right?
Yeah.
Like the Joker is more consistent. The Riddler is surprisingly more vast when it comes to interpretations. Right. And I still think like this is an effective interpretation of the Riddler. Mm-hmm. But, at the end of the day, it's still going to be the Riddler. There's still going to be riddles. There's still going to be like that sort of like
but I think
unraveling.
Making him a real guy to the extent that you're talking about, although like I'm making this clear as possible, I really genuinely think that would make it a much better film. I think it might be too far away from the Riddler for them to get away with their fan base,
or like from like Batman canon. Right. Look. If it's listen. If it's a good movie,
no one cares.
Bleep the fan base. Like that doesn't like that. That is always not going to matter. You know what I'm saying?
To what extent do we?
Fine. Maybe at the beginning. Maybe at like first glance, first inhale of the film, like people would be like, "That's not the Riddler," right? Like for example, like. This is a very specific example. Like Iron Man 3, you had Ben Kingsley be the Mandarin, but he just racist name. But he wasn't the Mandarin. He was just an actor who was the Mandarin, right? Which people at the time did not enjoy that because people wanted the Mandarin, which is just a funny sentence to say out loud. Yeah, but people wanted the Mandarin.
They wanted
but I think now, years later, people appreciate Iron Man 3 a lot more.
And that was such a good choice. That was freaking hilarious. And also I think it was went for the theme and the message they were going for a lot better. I think it really did capture their story a lot better. What Iron Man was going for. I think another thing that kind of added to the whole like this could really happen aspect is that this is the absolute hardest that any Batman iteration has ever gotten into. This is New York. Like Gotham's just New York.
Gotham Square Garden?
Gotham Square Garden
with the Times Square equivalent?
So aggressive, and the fact that like one of the very first shots of the entire movie is pretty much Times Square.
Did that bother you? Because I didn't care. I was like, oh, it's kind of like New York, and then like Gotham Square Garden doesn't sound good. Like you say it out loud, Gotham Square Garden. Like that just sounds ugly.
Right.
But like that was the extent of it.
I think I think Gotham Square Garden got me a little bit the second time. I was like, chill, here it comes. But the first time I actually really like it. I really, really like that because we got to remember, we have a podcast. We're people. We're artists. That doesn't give us like necessarily like the reason to speculate.
We are just Joe and Schmo.
We are just Joe and Schmo, but we're Joe and Schmo that have done this for a long time and do this for their lives. The average spectator, I don't think, is looking at this like that's a little too on the nose. They just, if they notice, then they're like, oh, this is kind of, they're trying to go for New York. Good for them. Like, they're not thinking too hard about it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I think what we see as too on the nose at times is actually right on the nose.
I mean, look, in the case of the New York thing, I think it's fine. It's whatever.
Right.
Like, is it on the nose? Sure. Who cares? Like, it's such a small part. Who cares?
How much were you, because we're, coming to the last few minutes.
Yeah.
For you, how much were you rooting for Zoe Kravitz and Robert Pattinson at the end? Catwoman and Bruce Wayne?
I mean, it was fine. I actually kind of feel like the relationship was a little bit forced.
Sure.
I actually don't really think Zoe Kravitz did that great of a performance anyways.
Sure.
I don't think her dialogue was that great.
I agree.
I'll at least give that. But she also did not really know what to do with that dialogue.
I agree.
So there was that as well. So it was a combination of those two things. And, like, it didn't feel like they were actually interested in each other. It only felt like they were actually interested in each other because the script demanded so. Not because those characters were actually interested in each other.
Yeah, every single time that they had a pseudo-romantic or romantic moment, I was always like, oh, where did that come from? Absolutely. That was something that I noticed. And
I wish they didn't kiss. Like, I don't understand.
Honestly, same. But I think the big thing for me that I kind of noticed the second time around, because the first time I noticed all those things as well. The second time I was kind of going into it more with a mindset or mind frame of like, I need to stop looking at Zoe Kravitz as like an actor that I need to expect to be like some version of Catwoman that is impressive, and I need to be like, okay, Zoe Kravitz is a cultural icon right now, especially in terms of like style and aesthetic and like just her presence and like her as a public figure and everything. I need to just like that needs to be my expectation. You know what I mean? I know, but I was like, let's just like calm down and like let's just let this be what it is. You know? Oh, and it's a 2-minute warning.
Woo!
There we go. Congrats to 2 minutes. But to wrap up that Zoe Kravitz point, I think that it is a lot of it comes from the fact that like the thing that people are going to remember is not the actual performance of Zoe Kravitz, but like the stills, the posters,
the action,
the aesthetic,
and the fact that
the compilations on
film.
YouTube and TikTok, you know what I mean? Like that's the main thing, not her performance in this movie. Now, Danny, give us
No. Quick review on Jeffrey Wright's Jeffrey Wright's? No. Yes, Jeffrey Wright's Gordon. Oh my God, soon to be Commissioner Gordon.
I love Jeffrey Wright. Huge Jeffrey Wright fan. Loved Westworld. Loved everything that he's done. I thought at first I was like, I don't know if he's my Commissioner Gordon. But as the movie went on, especially in that scene where he's whispering to the Batman, I'm like, okay, Jeffrey Wright was such a good pick.
Punch me in the face.
He's like, you need to punch me. Yeah, so funny. Yeah, so funny.
I'm looking forward to the growth of that character. I thought
agree.
he did okay, but I think it's going to grow into something really special.
And I trust Jeffrey Wright to grow that.
Yes.
Review. Give it to me.
Really good. You should go watch it. It's long. I think movies should start to have intermissions again. There, I said it. Mac.
That's the sizzle serve, Danny. And let me tell you, I completely agree. I think that that audiences would start to accept intermission type movies if they already trust it. Marvel could have done it, but never did. I think that the Batman is popular enough that people would still watch it if there was an intermission. They should try it. I completely agree. It is an excellent movie. I think it's definitely something that you should go watch because I highly encourage you going and seeing the trilogy that is about to be made by Matt Reeves over the course of the next couple of years. So hop on the bandwagon, folks, because we got to get this train on out of the station. Go ahead.
Awesome noir film. You should go watch it. Now, so there is a podcast, right, that gave me inspiration, Mac, to start this one. It is the Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Gatz. It was originally on ESPN Radio, and now it's just a podcast. And they helped me inspire to get this podcast started with you because I wanted to do something.
Dan Le Batard.
And I wanted to have a good time and a fun time. They made a musical. It's called The Big Game. It is a musical soundtrack. You can listen to it on Apple Music and Spotify. It's called The Big Game, produced by JT Daly as well.
I guess that's it, huh?
And that's it.